Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series on the Success Insight podcast. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Isabelle Edwards. Now, Izzy is an 18-year-old nature and wildlife photographer, artist, and conservationist living in the Pacific Northwest, and she is also a jumping spider appreciator and keeper. We're going to have to learn a little bit more about that. Izzy, welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Series on the Success Insight podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Howard.
Fantastic. And, I have to say, I have been kind of geeking out knowing that you're going to be on the podcast, Izzy, because I love your photography. And
thanks so much.
And for our listeners, we've been doing a lot of Outdoor Adventure Series episodes, and we recently had Danielle Taylor from the Journal of Wildlife Photography. She is the editor. And when I got to know Danielle, I got to know the Journal of Wildlife Photography and especially their Facebook group. And I began to see these wonderful images of owls, which I find extremely fascinating. And I noticed that most of them are by this young lady, Izzy Edwards. And so, Izzy, here you are again. And that just, to me, it's very exciting. And I would love if you could share some background of how you got into this whole outdoor wildlife nature photography space.
Of course. Yeah. So my parents have always really been in tune with nature and our natural environment. So from a very young age, I was taken out by my dad, specifically, and my mom, and we went on all sorts of different hikes around the Pacific Northwest and just exploring our natural region. And also my dad's good friend is a photographer, Art Wolf. And so I kind of got to learn wildlife photography through Art and my dad. And so they'd go out and they'd bring me on some of their trips up to Canada, and we'd see snowy owls and all sorts of really cool wildlife. I remember going to this one bird sanctuary where every winter we'd see saw-whet owls and great blue herons and these beautiful snow geese and these giant flocks. And it was really just wonderful moments that I remember from my childhood that really started to spark this love of wildlife in my heart. And at first it was a lot of drawing. So I was doing a lot of illustration work, especially when I was younger, like 10, 11, 12, I started doing some commissions for pet portraits. And in the Puget Sound, we have these local orca population, and each orca has its own special name. So people would commission their own orca portrait by me. So I'd draw orcas for people. And so I did a lot of artistry with the natural world and drawing landscapes and wildlife. But it wasn't until I was probably about 13 that I got more in tune with wildlife photography. And I started picking up my dad's professional camera, and I would borrow it and bring it on the whale watching boat when I'd go out and do naturalist tours. And so I'd start learning how to use those settings. And I, used cameras in the past when I was like 7 or 8, just point and shoot, taking pictures of the owls. But it wasn't until probably 15 years old, or 14 or 15, that I really got my first good picture of an owl, and it was a long-eared owl. And I remember it was a kind of a cloudy afternoon in British Columbia, and we were walking on this boardwalk when we saw a long-eared owl that was hiding in the brambles among the fall color, and it was just so beautiful. And the bird's eyes were just this yellow piercing gaze. And I thought to myself, I want to see more of these birds. Like, I can't believe I haven't seen, I haven't looked for these owls more. And so that was kind of the beginning of the owl adventures. And, I'd already learned how to use my camera gear and the settings. So 2018, end of 2018, 2019, and 2020, I just dove into this owl photography. And I wanted to see them all. And so in 2020, I did, and I was able to see all 19 of America's owl species.
Oh, wow. That is fantastic. Now, I just want to circle back a little bit. So your parents were very much into wildlife and nature. And was it in your dad, you said you had taken out his camera. Now, is he a professional photographer?
I would say that he's an amateur photographer. He really loves wildlife and landscape photography. He really wanted to be a wildlife photographer for the longest time, but he really has a compositional eye for landscape. And he tried for about 10 years to photograph wildlife, especially when he was alongside Art Wolf and they'd be out on photography expeditions. But he never was quite happy with his wildlife work. And so I think he was really excited and encouraged me when I started to get into it, because he felt like, he told me on multiple occasions and still does, that he feels like I kind of have the eye for wildlife in the family and he has more of the eye for the landscape. So he's definitely, I'd say he's pro level when it comes to his landscape work, because he really does have a great eye for those compositions.
It's fantastic. Now, he let you take this camera, and I noticed on your, I think it was your Instagram page, you list that you have a Canon R5. And for our listeners, that's a camera. If I was making a living doing wildlife photography, that's the camera I would buy. But I have a used EOS 60 Mark II, which I'm very happy about, but neither here nor there. But you took this camera out whale watching, and I would imagine to take this camera out there, with, I would imagine, a relatively long lens and keeping it steady. What was it like, not only to get used to using this camera, but to be able to go out on these boats and doing the marine work that you were doing and taking pictures? So how did you kind of roll all that in, and doing the work on the boat, but having the time to take these pictures?
Yeah, so at the time I was using my dad. So he had a 40D and a 70 Mark II. I had a 70 and a 70 Mark II. And at the time he was only letting me use the 40D and the 70.
Smart
So I
dad.
think,
Smart dad.
yes, he was like, no, my professional camera is not going in the child's hands on the ocean. But I usually shot with the 40D or 70 Mark II, and I had the 100 to 400 Canon lens, and it was the original version. So now it's
Sure.
a little over 20 years old.
Right.
And it's a great lens. So that one was wonderful being on the boat. So when I was working on the boat as a marine naturalist, I was actually our photo ID and just talking to the guests. So it was my job to also get some photos for the Facebook website and the Facebook page. So I'd be out on top of the boat and just trying to balance back and forth, because it does get pretty rocky. And it helps having the 100 to 400, because it is a much lighter than my current setup that I have. So I haven't been back out on the whale watching boat with my current setup. So I'm not sure how that would go. But at the time, it was just a lot of just trying to get my balance, because I didn't have a tripod, and making sure, like, you'd have the orcas in the frame 1 second, and then the boat would rock over here, and then they'd be 100 yards away. So it was a little difficult, but really fun way to learn how to use my camera settings appropriately and learn the exposure triangle and whatnot with the orcas.
Fantastic. And I have to say, I have the newer version of the 100 to 400. And so I can't wait, because it's a new lens for myself. And we have some wildlife areas here in Las Vegas. And so I'm anxious to get out there and shoot birds and eagles, but it's a great lens. And so
Yeah.
when you spent this time out on the boat, when did the kind of the love of the owl start to come into the picture for you? Or had this been going on at the same time? Because you have a water, certain times of the year, other times of the year, you can be on land. When did this kind of movement towards the owl start to take place?
Yeah, so I have a very specific point in my life where I'm able to separate those two passions. And while working on the whale watching boat, we were having some trouble working with the legalities of watching the southern resident killer whales. And in the Puget Sound, we have two different subspecies of orca, and one of those is the southern resident killer whales, and they are unfortunately critically endangered. And there's only, I think right now, 72 orcas left in the population. So
wow.
Their numbers are really dwindling fast. And so in 2018, it became illegal to watch the southern resident killer whales. And it was a big change for whale watching in the Puget Sound, because for the past, 30 so years, a lot of our ecotourism has been watching these orcas, and people come from around the world to see J-Pod and L-Pod, these famous orcas that were filmed during Free Willy. And so after it became illegal, it was a very, very sad time in my life, I remember, because my favorite animal in the world was going extinct faster than, in front of your eyes. And I stopped working on the whale watching boat because they cut a lot of the staff on the boat. And there was a big time where I don't think our boat was even going out. And when I got back on land and wasn't really out on the boat much in the weekends, I kind of was at a loss at what to do. Like, this is my passion. I go out on the water pretty much every week. And now, since I can't do that, I started doing a lot of these nature walks, and I'd go on different trips locally. So Vancouver, BC, or just Eastern Washington, to just go out and look at wildlife. And I wasn't really looking for anything in particular, just kind of exploring our Pacific Northwest region and enjoying nature. And that's in late 2018, November of 2018, I believe it was, when I had that experience with the long-eared owl that we saw on the boardwalk. And oh my gosh, it felt like my heart stopped seeing that bird so close. And just, she was even below eye level. So she was probably at waist level to me, and I had to squat down to see her. And she was just so beautiful. So I think that is definitely the defining moment when it kind of switched from whale watching to owls. And ever since that day with the long-eared owl, it's been owls ever since.
Wow. Now, I know you shared a picture with me that we're going to put on the banner. And I want to thank you for that, because it actually put me in a position of having to expand or realign some of the imagery and the wording on my banner, because I wanted to get as much of you and the owl in the picture. So thank you for that in advance.
Of course,
You'll
yeah.
see it. But how far do you have to travel out of your home to go into an area where these owls live? Because I was looking at some of your Instagram pages. I mean, you actually have names for some of the owls, and I know I should have written it down, like Pancho or Paco and his girlfriend or something like that. But where do you have to go, and how far away is it for you to be able to be in a position where you can just spend time in nature, sit, walk, be patient, and to be able to see these wonderful birds?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Here in Washington State, we actually have 15 out of the 19 American owl species, which is quite a lot for just one state. So luckily, for seeing the majority of America's species, I don't really have to go too far. And so usually for Pancho and Pancha, that's the lovely couple that I see in Seattle. And they actually lived right next to my home for the longest time. And I just had to go right up the street, and I'd spend hours day after day with Pancho and Pancha, especially in early spring. So March and April is a great time for them. And they're super vocal, super active right around sunset. And so they are really accessible. And unfortunately, recently I moved far away from them. So now I'm about 2 hours from Pancho and Pancha, but I'm trying to establish some relationships with the owls that are in the new neighborhood. So we have a barred owl pair that lives up the street from us, maybe a couple minutes. And I'm hoping to find them, but I haven't got eyes on them yet. So that's for the more local owl species, like barred owls that hang out near the city, and great horned owls also hang out near the city. So I can see them relatively, like behind my house. We had a nesting pair behind my apartment near Seattle last year. And so those species I don't have to go far. But when it comes to like my owl big year, where I'm trying to see all 19 of America's owl species, that definitely requires a fair bit of traveling. And in the year of 2020, I was able to complete it. And I say the farthest we went for one species was southern Mexico. And that was on the
Oh,
border of
wow.
Belize. We had the Ferruginous pygmy owl on December 26th. So only a few days before the end of the year, where I could complete my owl big year. And we got that little pygmy owl. So that was quite a trek for one bird. Usually they hang out in southern Arizona, but I had struck out multiple times when I went to look for them. So we decided last minute, my mom surprised me with, we were going to do Christmas in Mexico. And I just happened to look up, maybe the Ferruginous pygmy owl hangs out near Mexico. And to my surprise, like where our hotel was that we were staying was like the hot spot for that species in the world. So we had a great time with them. And I think we found 4 or 5 of them. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it definitely depends. So the local species, not far at all, but I know also in 2020, we went to the East Coast, New Jersey, for the Eastern screech owl. So that one was also a far trek.
Okay. Wow. By the way, I am an incredibly opportunistic individual. I just want to let you know that, Izzy. I am going to get up to your neck of the woods because I want to go out there shooting with you, and especially when these are in your back door. I mean, I just cannot believe that.
It's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. There was a gentleman I met at the Outdoor Writers Association of America, their annual conference this past year, and actually 2 weeks ago. What am I saying? And he was very much a fisherman, but he also had these wonderful images out on Long Island of snow owls, which if you're a Harry Potter fan, of course you like snow owls, but I mean, to me, they were gorgeous. But I think all owls for that matter, are absolutely just amazing creatures. And the fact that you have these out literally outside your door, I find is just truly amazing. I mean, it's, couldn't plan that any better than if you tried.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely great to live in a region that has so many of them just in the back door. And it's great. Like, I know, growing up in this region, I kind of grew up thinking like owls are super common and people see them all the time. But it's only probably because, I grew up around parents that we went looking for these birds. And it wasn't until I was probably 10 that I realized a lot of my friends are like, what the heck? I've never seen an owl before. Like, how are you seeing all these owls? And that's kind of when I realized that not everyone has the opportunity to see them. And it might take like a little bit of searching, hanging out past sunset to see them. But especially in areas of Seattle, pretty much all of my neighbors can say that they hear owls in the backyard every night, but they never get to see them because I guess they don't go out after sunset, or they don't spend a lot of time looking for them, even though they just live right in the backyard.
That is amazing. And I'm curious, your friends, I mean, obviously they know that you have an affinity for wildlife, nature photography. Do they go out shooting with you?
I wish,
or at least
honestly.
join you, or at least join you.
Yeah, so I have a lot of my friends I made in high school. So a couple years back, like maybe a few years back, so when I was a freshman in high school, I made a lot of connections with the kids in our school. And I had a lot of friends that were more into, but they weren't so much into nature, and they were more into sports and, their phones and regular high school things. And I would encourage my friends, like on multiple occasions, like we have local foxes that hang out on this island near my home. And I asked on multiple occasions to my buddies, like, do you guys want to come out and see baby foxes? We can, you can take your phone pictures, selfies with the foxes. But it's almost always like, yeah, I'd love to come. And then they never want to make plans. It's always like, well, maybe I'd rather go out to the movies tonight. So I definitely have had friends say they want to come, but very, very few occasions have I had my high school's friends and peers come out and see wildlife with me.
Oh my God. If I was there, if I was in high school with you, just knowing me, I've always been interested in photography. I would so be there. So when you go out shooting now, you have your parents, do you shoot, are you solitary? Do you go out with a group, maybe, some other enthusiast? I mean, how are you? You obviously you have the time because it's literally in your backyard, and that's the wonderful thing about weekends. Is anybody else enjoying this experience with you?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely like the number one people I bring along with me are my parents. My mom and dad come on a lot of adventures with me because they are just, for the longest time, I think my dad really wanted to see a lot of these owl species, but maybe he just didn't get the time to go out and see them. But now that I have found and put in the time to find the locations for them, my dad is so excited to come along with me and see some of the rare species in our our state. So we'll see the boreal owl. We went 2 weeks ago looking for boreal owls, and that's probably, I'd say, the boreal owl is the most elusive species in North America. They're not the most uncommon or rare. They're just they hang out in very, very high elevation, around 7,000 feet, and they only call like one or 2 weeks out of the year, and they're purely nocturnal, so super hard to find. And I think my dad was really excited to go out and look for him with me 2 weeks ago. And we had one that was like 5 feet away from our head that was calling. That was really cool.
Oh, wow.
And so definitely parents come with me a lot on trips. I have made a lot of connections through Instagram and social media with other wildlife photographers. And so oftentimes I'll, text a friend if I'm in their area. If they're in my area, they'll message me and say that they want to look for owls, or I'll say, if you want to meet up and look for something. So I'll go. And like this past weekend, yesterday, I met up with my friends in Yellowstone, and I was in Tetons, and we met up and photographed moose and whatnot. So that was pretty cool. But unfortunately, not a lot of my friends come and visit me in Washington. I always offer like, you gotta come see the owls in the winter, but nobody ever comes up. So maybe one of these years.
First of all, Izzy, you said, Yellowstone, Tetons so casually. It's like, that was so casual. And one of the things I like about, for example, Las Vegas, and for my listeners, you will have heard me say this before, I love getting out to the desert, and I love dark sky photography, the Milky Way. And
that's so fun.
Yeah. And there's an area about an hour and a half north called Lake Parangaset. and during the winter, the eagles arrive.
Oh,
And
wow.
but I would love, in the winter, just to see the owls that you're seeing. It'd be such a cool, I mean, I think that is so cool just to be able to do that. And as you begin to or continue your development, as a photographer, a nature photographer, artist, I know you're into conservation. And how are you using this gift? And it is truly a gift to be able to educate and inform, inspire others through your work.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite things I love doing, is especially inspiring youth, like kids, my even peers my age, like just get out and contribute towards our planet, because we are in trouble and our planet isn't doing so good. And if we get our the kids of our future to get more interested in wildlife and conservation and protecting our natural world, I think we'll have a lot healthier of a future for our planet. So to try and get people involved, I do a lot of conservation work, and I think a lot of people really recognize, like, especially if you get a picture with an owl. So I try and post, like, after conservation work of like handling and banding owls, I'll post a lot of photos of me handling the owls and give a full description, especially in like Facebook or Instagram, of like why we do what we do for these owls, and like why it's important to get them out of their nest and ban them and weigh them, and kind of just give an explanation. And when people see these photos of a young girl handling an owl, it's like, oh my gosh, what is that? That's why is she holding that bird? So then they read the caption, they're like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that our burrowing owls were in crisis and they need some help and volunteer work, and I didn't know that our flammulated owls need this or that. And I think it really inspires people, like, oh my gosh, this is a job, this is a career that you can actually pursue, is helping wildlife and getting hands-on involved with them. So I think definitely sharing like the stories of my conservation work is very helpful to getting people inspired, because I almost always get like at least 20 comments saying, how can I help and how can I get involved in what you're doing? I want your job. How can I do this? So I think that's the biggest way.
That's very cool. When we first started the call, before we hit the record button, I kind of wanted to confirm some information about you. So you are, a recent high school graduate, but you also went on to head college early on. So you have your associate's degree. Is this the interest in high school and now in college, or where you got the associates? Is this in the area of wildlife and conservation? What type of studies are you doing?
Yeah, so for my associate's degree, that was for Running Start program with Washington. It was basically just a regular general associate's degree to get your foot in the door. But once I go to university, I'm hoping to pursue maybe like forestry or something along the lines of, environmental work. And I know a lot of my friends that, are park rangers, and that's kind of one of my ultimate goals, is to be a park ranger when I'm older. They do the forestry programs through college and stuff, and that kind of gets you a good foot in the door towards being a park ranger and stuff like that. So that's something I've been looking into.
Fantastic. Now, with your photography, now, again, for our listeners, I discovered Izzy's work on the Journal of Wildlife Photography's private Facebook group. You have a lot of photos posted up there. What's your reaction to, number one, posting, and in some ways you're kind of putting yourself out there, like, here's my work. And I know the journal itself, I mean, a lot of them, there's a lot of education that's going on. There's also, as you know, as I know, everybody's got an opinion. Okay.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So what's your experience really putting your work out there for others to see? Because again, I found it amazing. I mean, it's like, oh man, I want to go out and shoot with this young lady. But what is your reaction to just putting your photos out there and getting the reaction from the other members of the group?
So for the most part, it's really wonderful members, and a lot of people just have similar interests, and they see your photos, and it's a lot of positive feedback. And for the most part, I've really enjoyed that. It feels very encouraging to post in the journal, and then after a few hours, you look at your post and it has all these comments and engagement, and it makes my heart feel a little warm, and like people appreciate your work as much as they do.
What you're sharing with people like me and other viewers is just totally amazing, and I think you are really just an exceptional photographer. And again, I'm incredibly envious in my own way, because I want to go out and shoot these owls, because I didn't even I mean, I know owls, they're in the forest. I heard some up in Vermont, so I know they're there. But just the fact that they are in your backyard is just, to me, totally amazing. And to be able to handle them as well, and to be able to help with the banding, and just, I mean, who knew that people are actually doing this kind of work? So really, I applaud you for really the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I think one of the biggest things that comes with sharing these very intimate experiences with the owls, handling them and, getting these close experiences, I think it's definitely, I just try and keep positive and like surround myself by all these, wonderful, encouraging people. And it really is such a great journey and like so exhilarating to finally get that shot because I can totally relate with the owls, trying to get that one species that might be a little too hard and, you have to go at night with either lights or whatnot to just get that one shot. And, compared to somebody who, maybe sees that bird all the time, my picture is probably, but to me, it's like one of my favorite photos. And so might not be technically the best, but those memories that you made capturing the image is really what you take home in your heart.
Almost definitely. What's in store for you and as say that, like, the coming year, and your to-do list for photography and the photos that you want to capture? What's on your agenda?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I've been focused on these owls for the past 3 years. I've really been trying to get all these, different owl compositions and the different species. And now that I've done the big year, and I'm trying to do it again this year, I only have a couple species left this year. But I wouldn't say like I'm necessarily like bored of owls. Like obviously, I love seeing them, and I'm going to get out and see them as much as I can. But I noticed like the past few months, I have recently been trying to get more into bear photography and fox photography. So I really, really love bears and foxes. They've got to be like my second favorites next to the owl. And recently, this past summer, I was able to get up to Alaska and just tour around and see the brown bears up there. And it was really just one of the most magical experiences I've ever had. So I'm hoping next year I can get out to places like Montana, Wyoming, and Tetons a little bit more, and just go and look for bears and some bigger mammals because I think that's kind of like the direction I'm kind of steering towards at the moment.
That's very cool. And again, getting back to the Journal of Wildlife Photography, there have been some exceptional bear pictures this year and a couple wolf pictures. And by the way, as someone whose last name is Fox, I definitely have an affinity for foxes. So
they're so fun.
yes, and I mean, they're very, lots of energy, lots of energy. So I'm curious too, is what advice would you give someone, Izzy, that really, maybe it's just starting to pick up a camera, maybe has come across some pictures like on the journal, or, your shots on Instagram? What advice would you give for somebody new?
I think like, especially if you're trying to get into wildlife photography, the biggest thing that beginners kind of often overlook is they really want to get up close and get those sharp shots first. Because when we're first into wildlife photography, we see in all these groups like the journal, these super sharp portrait images of these wild animals up close. And the first thing we want to do is just get that same, clarity and that same closeness with our subject. And for beginners, I'd say my best advice is to scrap that. Try not to run right up to your subject and, get that face shot or portrait shot real quickly. Instead, I recommend to sit down and just kind of, immerse yourself in the nature and just kind of be one with your subject, not try and gain anything from it, not try and get up really close and closer, creep up closer, but, just enjoy watching the animal comfortably from where you are. And I've noticed that, especially with owls, if you just sit and wait at a respectful distance, they will eventually either, wake up, or if they're hunting, they will come right your way and right your direction and get really close, especially if they trust you after a period of time. And also going along with that, once you are with the subject that you're shooting, try and get different angles, not, just stand and shoot from one perspective, but really try and walk around different angles of your subject and try and see like different lighting and composition and maybe different foreground or background values that you like. And just really not trying to like just stand and shoot, but really looking for all those different opportunities and angles.
I love that. It's great advice. And I will definitely take that when I get up to the lake and attempt with my shots of the eagles. So I've got to ask this question because I can't let it go before we end the show. Tell me about the jumping spiders. What in the heck is going on here?
Oh my goodness. So that is a great question. So earlier this spring, I was hanging out with my good friend Zia, and Zia is a northern spotted owl biologist, but she is also just a lover of pretty much any critter. And I mean, this girl loves ticks, and she thinks ticks are cute. So we're out in her backyard, and we're looking at all sorts of different bugs and critters are hanging out in her backyard. And she was telling me about her jumping spider friends. And I'm kind of thinking like, oh yeah, I kind of know what a jumping spider is. They got the big eyes, and they're harmless. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, she has jumping spider friends. Like, what does this mean? And so she has, in pretty much every corner of her yard or in her house, she has a jumping spider pal that she has named and she feeds. And I just thought that was so crazy. And I wanted to look for one of her jumping spider friends. So I'm like, where do they usually hang out? So she showed me a couple areas around the yard that the jumping spiders hang out. And sure enough, within 1 minute of looking, there's this jumping spider I see underneath her. So her kids have this big play thing with a slide and everything. And the jumping spider is hanging underneath the lip of the slide. So I look under, and I'm not a big spider fan. And at the time I'm actually kind of scared of spiders. So I get this long stick, and I didn't want to like hurt him or poke him or anything, but I got the stick and I just kind of put it in front of him to kind of see what he'd do. Cause I'm like, is this guy going to like jump on my face? Like, I don't know what's going to happen here. So I put the stick in front of him. And at the time he was kind of like under the lip of the slide. And as soon as he saw the stick, he runs out under of their slide. I'm like, what the heck? I've never seen a bug or spider like respond in this way before. So then the jumping spider, it comes out and it follows my stick around, and wherever I put the stick, the jumping spider would run after it, and it would turn and tilt its head and like really try and analyze the stick. And I was like, what the heck, am I like actually seeing a spider with intelligence that's like trying to figure out its surroundings? And I didn't know that spiders were intelligent until I met the jumping spider. And so I kind of got the confidence to pick him up. So I picked him up, and he was just intent at looking at me, and he would just tilt his head and he would get closer to my face. And it was like just an experience I can't really explain, like with a bug that seems to be sentient and know that you're also a living being. So I kind of looked it up and did some research, and I found out, holy crap, it's true that jumping spiders are currently, science has found that they are probably one of the most intelligent insects on the planet, and they can recognize living beings. And I thought that was so cool. And they're super inquisitive, and they did all this other studies with their brains and stuff. So I just kind of fell in love with them. And over the months, I tried looking for them in my home state because my friend Zia lives in Oregon. So went back up to Washington. I'm looking for these jumping spiders, and I can't find any. And I'm like, what the heck? So I look up, jumping spider species in my state. And unfortunately, Washington state is like the only state in the US that does not have many of the larger jumping spider species. We have a lot of like the teeny tiny, like microscopic ones, but we don't have a lot of the bigger species. So what I found out is you can actually order them online.
Okay.
And not only can you order them online, but you can pick out a particular breeder that has bred a particular color line of recessive gene of jumping spider. It is crazy. It's almost like dog breeding, how complex this is, but they're like trying to find out the different recessive genes for whatever color this spider is. And you can find like this particular color variant spider. So my first spider I ever adopted online was from Indonesia, and her name's Java, and she's a Bella Vista jumping spider breeding line from Indonesia, and she's about the size of my thumb. And I just fell in love with her, and I bought a macro lens, and they're trainable. Like I didn't think you could train a spider, but you can train her to go through mazes. She can jump on your hand, like on command. It's pretty crazy. So they're something I could probably talk about all day, but
Oh my. And I have to share with you, Izzy, the shivers started when you said I picked it up. You're back in your friend's backyard with the stick. It's like, oh my God, I'm shivering right now.
And I definitely was not too like I picked up spiders in the house and like saved them and put them in the backyard before, but like I'm not into spiders, and I wasn't wanting to pick that little guy up. But as soon as I saw his reaction to the stick, I'm like, all right, I trust you. You're not going to bite me. So I picked him up, and he was just so cute. And I brought him back in, and my friend Zia has 2 kids, and oh my gosh, the kids were all over the spider, and they were just having so much fun. And it was just so fun to hang out with this little insect that was almost like a tiny dog.
Oh my, oh my. I think I'm going to leave it at that with the spider, but I'm so glad you shared that story. I mean, it's, I usually don't run away when I see a spider, or I don't see too many snakes. It's, there's definitely an aversion to it, but some people yell, scream, and run away. But
Hmm.
I definitely have to collect my wits about me before I would
Yep.
willingly put a spider on my hand. Now, I have held snakes before, but definitely not the snakes that I would find out in the Mojave National Preserve, but neither here nor there. I do have an ask for you, Izzy, and I would love if you would share some of the pictures you've shot, and in fact, even your pet's, jumping spider. If you have a shot of this young insect, and maybe it's by itself, or it's comfortable in your hand, but I would love if you could share a shot of it, perhaps even like the pygmy owl that you were shooting down in southern Mexico, and of course Pancho and Pancha. I love if again, the shots like that for our webpage, Success Insight Podcast. It would be so great to share some of your work with our listeners if you're open to doing that.
Oh yeah, of course. That would be great.
Fantastic. Now, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, for sure. So my Instagram is where kind of like my public gallery is, where my most recent posts will be and where I'm most active. And that's Northwest_wildlife on Instagram.
Okay.
But if you would like to purchase some of my prints, and not all of my prints are available for purchase, unfortunately, but my website is isabelleedwardsphoto.com. Isabelle spelled Isabelle.
Okay, fantastic. And we're going to definitely provide the backlinks to your website, isabelleedwardsphoto.com, as well as Instagram at Northwest_wildlife. And we'll provide for our listeners at least the website, Journal of Wildlife Photography, and they can then get to hopefully find some of your shots there if they're not already there. I know they're going to be there, as well as they can then find the social sites for the journal. Izzy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Again, I was just so looking forward to chatting with you, and I just so admire the work that you're doing, and your images again are totally amazing. And I am definitely going to get up to the Pacific Northwest in the winter. I mean, I think Southwest does fly between Las Vegas and Seattle, and so I am going to figure out a way to get up there so I can go shooting with you. I think that would be so much fun.
Yeah, that would be great. And thanks so much for having me on. And I can't wait if we'll meet up in person this winter. That'd be great.
Fantastic. So listen, hang tight. We're going to do a quick close, and then you and I can chat some more. Okay.
Cool.
Very good. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Izzy Edwards. She's an outdoor enthusiast, wildlife and nature photographer, an artist, a conservationist, and an appreciator of jumping spiders. And she is a spider keeper because she has a pet spider. I'm still shivering. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I mean, what an amazing young lady. She's 18 years old. And, and really, credits and kudos to her parents, just really and to dad, who's giving up one of his non-professional cameras so she can go out and shoot with it. It's just really the idea that, so young and really so talented around her nature photography and her shots of the owls. And I know there's some bigger wildlife out there that she has shot, especially the fox, which I totally appreciate. It's just a wonderful, journey that she is going on, and just the skills that she is developing to really be this consummate nature and wildlife photographer. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Izzy, and, let us know what you think. You can visit us on successinsightpodcast.com. You can leave a comment, you can check out the pictures we're going to share on the site. You can also find us on the LinkedIn and on Facebook, our Success Insight Podcast pages. Before the end of the year, we're going to be breaking off the outdoor adventure series into its own website. But until then, successinsightpodcast.com is the place to be. As far as our podcasting platforms are concerned, you can find us on Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. We are on Audible, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and especially Spotify, where we actually have all of our Outdoor Adventure Series episodes available for you to download. And I think once we publish this episode with Izzy, I think we're going to be up to 29, 30 episodes. So I think you could probably drive across the US at least one way and listen to all these episodes. So we definitely are pretty excited about the growing library of Outdoor Adventure Series episodes that we have. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, your family, practice social distancing if it makes sense. Wear your mask if it makes sense. But above all, be good and think about the community, think about nature, and they all affect each other. So, look into, conservationists, look into activities that you can work on to really make, this living together, surviving and being in nature as pleasurable and as it can be. You can tell folks I'm going off script. Hope you enjoyed again this episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series on the Success Insight podcast, and we will see you again for another episode. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.